Welcome back to the Anti-Cancer Lab. If you're new here, pull up a chair. You're in good company. This is where I read the cancer studies most people never see and tell you, plainly, what they mean for your plate. No fear, no hype. So grab a coffee and let's look at this together. Today's one is for the men and honestly, for the women who love them and do the grocery shopping. So stick around either way. We're talking about the prostate, that little gland nearly every man over 60 starts thinking about, and two cheap seeds you can hold in the palm of one hand. Not a supplement, not a powder in a tub, a handful of seeds. And I'll tell you up front, the title says these seeds start prostate cancer cells, and that phrase comes straight out of the laboratory language. So before you get the wrong idea, I'm going to be very precise about what that does and does not mean for a living person. Stay with me, because the honest version of this is better than the hyped one. Quick note before we start, and it matters more on this channel than any other. I'm Dr. Becker. I'm a researcher, not your doctor. I have never had cancer, and I have never treated a patient in my life. Everything I'm about to tell you is me reading published studies and translating them for general education. None of it is medical advice. None of it replaces your urologist, your oncologist, or your treatment. And no seed in your kitchen is a cure for anything. If you're being screened, keep getting screened. If you're in treatment, every word here goes alongside the people caring for you, never instead of them. Bring what's useful to your medical team and let them drive. Alright, let's get into it. Here's what I'd tell my own brother if he asked me. And the reason I put it that way is that this is exactly the conversation a lot of men your age are having, quietly, with nobody. A man hits his 60s, he goes in for a checkup, and his doctor mentions his PSA ticked up a little from last year. PSA, that's prostate-specific antigen. It's just a protein the prostate makes that they measure in a blood test, and when the number creeps up, it's a flag to keep an eye on things. Not a diagnosis, a flag. And what happens next, almost every time, is the man goes home, sits down at the computer, and falls into a black hole of internet advice. Half of it terrifying, all of it contradictory, most of it trying to sell him a $200 bottle of something. So if my own brother called me tonight and said his number had crept up and he was scared and didn't know what to put in his cart, I wouldn't send him to a supplement store. I tell him about a couple of seeds, and I tell him the truth about each one. That's this whole video. Let me start with the lead, the one in the thumbnail, the handful. Pumpkin seeds, pepitas, if you buy the green-hulled kind. And I want to be careful and warm here at the same time, because pumpkin seeds are a genuinely good food, and they're also wildly overhyped online, and both of those things are true. So let me give you the honest read of why the prostate, specifically, cares about pumpkin seeds. Two reasons. The first is zinc. Pumpkin seeds are one of the richest everyday food sources of zinc, which is a mineral. And here's the interesting part. The prostate gland concentrates more zinc than almost any other soft tissue in the body. It hoards it. Nobody fully understands every reason why, but a healthy prostate is a zinc-rich place. And researchers have noticed for a long time that prostate tissue tends to lose a lot of that zinc as it becomes cancerous. Now I have to slow you down right here, because this is where the internet sprints ahead of the evidence. The fact that cancerous prostate tissue has less zinc does not mean that eating more zinc reverses or prevents that. That's a leap nobody has earned. It's an interesting observation that keeps researchers curious. It is not a result. I'd rather you hold that loosely and accurately than tightly and wrong. The second reason for pumpkin seeds is a compound called beta-sitosterol. And I want you to hold on to this one because it's where pumpkin seeds actually have a real human footprint, just not the one the headlines claim. Beta-sitosterol is a phytosterol, and let me translate that on the spot. Phytosterols are plant fats shaped almost exactly like cholesterol, so similar that they jostle with cholesterol in your gut. And here's the honest documented thing. Beta-sitosterol has real human evidence, actual clinical trials, for easing the urinary symptoms of an enlarged prostate. The medical name for that is BPH, benign prostatic hyperplasia. And let me translate that too. BPH is a swollen but non-cancerous prostate, the kind that has half the men I know getting up 3 times a night to use the bathroom. In trials, beta-sitosterol helped with that flow and that night waking. Now listen to me very carefully because this is the most important sentence in this whole section. That is evidence for symptoms of a non-cancerous prostate. That is not cancer evidence. I am not going to let you walk away thinking a study about peeing more comfortably is a study about cancer, because it isn't, and conflating those two is exactly the kind of thing this channel exists to stop. For cancer specifically, the pumpkin seed work is largely in the lab and it's early. Cells in a dish, some animal work. Promising in the way early things are promising, which is to say, a reason to keep looking, not a reason to make a promise. So let me put pumpkin seeds on the plate, because mechanism with no plate action is just trivia, and I don't do trivia here. The realistic version is the easiest thing in the world. A small handful, about an ounce, of raw or dry roasted unsalted pumpkin seeds as a snack, or scattered over your yogurt, or thrown on a salad or into your oatmeal. That's it. You can buy a big bag for a few dollars and it keeps for weeks in the cupboard, longer in the fridge. I'll tell you what I'd actually put on my own plate, and I do. I keep a jar of pepitas on the counter and a small handful goes onto my morning yogurt. And there's this nutty, faintly green crunch to them that makes the whole bowl feel like a treat instead of a health chore. Skip the heavily salted, candied, or roasted in oil versions, not because they're poison, but because the salt is the thing your heart and your blood pressure don't need, and you're trying to do your body a favor, not trade one problem for another. Raw or dry roasted, unsalted, a handful. Pennies a serving. That's the lane. Now that's one. Here's the next. And this is the one I'd actually lean on harder if my brother called, because the human signal behind it is the strongest of the day. Ground flaxseed. And I want to stress that first word, ground, with everything I've got, because it's the difference between this working and being a complete waste of your money, and I'll come back to it. Flaxseed is the single richest food source of compounds called lignans. Let me translate that immediately. Lignans are plant compounds, and here's the clever part. Your gut bacteria take those lignans and convert them into two molecules called enterolactone and enterodiol, and those act as weak phytoestrogens, which just means weak, plant-based hormone-like molecules, much gentler than the hormones your own body makes. Enterolactone, that's the main one your gut bacteria produce from those lignans. Hold on to that word. And the reason any of this matters for the prostate is that prostate cancer is, for many men, a hormone-sensitive disease. It responds to hormonal signals. And the thinking researchers have been chasing is whether these gentle plant compounds can nudge that hormonal environment in a quieter, less growth-friendly direction. And here's where flax earns the spotlight. Because unlike most of what gets a wellness headline, there is real human work. Let me tell you what it actually was, plainly, and then I'm going to hedge it hard, because you deserve both halves. There was a small clinical study done in men who were awaiting prostatectomy, which is surgery to remove the prostate. Men who already had a diagnosis and were scheduled for the operation. For about a month before their surgery, some of them ate ground flaxseed, roughly 30 grams a day, which is about 2 to 3 tablespoons. And then, after the surgery, the researchers looked at the actual removed prostate tissue under the microscope and measured something called Ki-67. Let me translate Ki-67 on the spot. It's a laboratory marker of how fast cells are dividing, basically a speedometer for cell division. And in cancer, faster division is generally worse. And in the men who'd eaten the ground flaxseed, that Ki-67 marker, that division speedometer, was lower than in the men who hadn't. Now I have to plant the flag, and I want you to really hear me, because this is the whole ballgame on this channel. Wait, let me say that more carefully, because the distinction matters more than the finding. That was a small study. It was short, about a month. It was done in men who were already heading into surgery, which is a very particular situation. And what it measured was a biomarker, a signpost in the tissue, not whether any man lived longer, not whether any tumor shrank, not whether the cancer was beaten. A speedometer reading dropped. That is a real, measured, published, genuinely encouraging observation. And it's exactly the kind of small concrete finding that earns a food a real research future. But it does not prove that eating ground flaxseed slows prostate cancer in everyday life. And I won't pretend it does. I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking, Becker, you just told me the strongest evidence of the day and then spent 30 seconds taking it apart. So why bother? Fair, that's a completely fair question, and here's my honest answer. I bother because the direction is consistent and the food is harmless and nearly free. There's also a long line of observational work, the population kind, where men with higher levels of enterolactone in their blood, the very molecule your gut makes from flax lignans, tend to show some lower prostate cancer measures. And I have to be careful with that the way I always am, because observational work shows you an association, a pattern, never a cause. Men with more enterolactone might just eat more fiber and plants across the board and live differently in a dozen protective ways. You can't pull one thread out of a whole life and call it the cause. But when the small human surgery study and the big population pattern lean the same direction, that's a food I'm comfortable putting in my brother's cart. Not as medicine, as a sensible bet at a price of almost nothing. So let me put flax on the plate, and this is the part where I have to be a stickler, because the how matters as much as the what. Here is the single most important practical thing in this entire video. Whole flax seeds, the little hard brown or golden seeds, pass straight through your body undigested. They go in whole and they come out whole, and you get almost nothing from them. The hard shell is too tough, so you must use ground flaxseed, sometimes sold as flax meal, or grind the whole seeds yourself in a cheap coffee grinder or a blender. Ground, every time. If you take one thing from today, take that. Because I've watched people sprinkle whole flax seeds on their cereal for years thinking they were doing something, and they were essentially eating decorative gravel. Grind it and you unlock the lignans, and you also unlock the omega-3 fat in there, a plant omega-3 called ALA. 1 to 2 tablespoons a day is the realistic dose. And the texture, I'll be honest, is part of the appeal for me. Ground flax has this soft, nutty, almost malty graininess that disappears into things. I stir a tablespoon into my oatmeal, where it thickens it into something heartier, or into yogurt, or into a smoothie, where you won't even notice it's there. Now, one more practical thing that nobody tells you. Store your ground flax in the fridge or the freezer, because once it's ground, those healthy fats start to oxidize, which is just a fancy word for going stale and rancid, and a closed bag in the freezer keeps it fresh for months. So, ground, a tablespoon or two a day, kept cold. Pennies a day, and it does double duty for your heart and your gut while it's at it. I want to give you one more honest layer on that flax, because I get asked to show my homework, and you're right to ask. People hear phytoestrogen and they get nervous, especially around the hormone-sensitive cancer, and they ask me, is a plant estrogen safe for a man with prostate concerns? And the honest answer from the evidence we have is that these flax lignans behave as weak, modulating compounds, not as the strong estrogens people fear. And the human work we do have, including that pre-surgery study, didn't show harm. It showed that encouraging dip in the division marker. So I'm not nervous about a tablespoon of ground flax in oatmeal. But, and this is the honest catch, that's the food. I am talking about the whole ground seed as a food. I am not talking about concentrated lignan pills or high-dose flaxseed oil capsules, which are a different, isolated, much more concentrated thing, and the food evidence does not automatically transfer to a pill. Eat the seed, ground, as food. That's the lane I can stand behind. Now here's where I have to slow you right down, because this is one of the most important honesty beats I'll ever give you on this channel, and it could genuinely save you from wasting money or worse. When men start reading about prostate and nutrients, they very quickly run into selenium, a trace mineral, and they run into the idea that selenium and vitamin E prevent prostate cancer, and they go buy high-dose supplements of both. So let me tell you what the actual research showed, because it's the opposite of what people assume. There was a very large, careful clinical trial, a real one, testing selenium and vitamin E supplements in men to see if they prevented prostate cancer, and it did not prevent it. The supplements did not work, and it gets more important than that, because the arms of the trial taking those high-dose supplements, particularly the vitamin E, actually showed signals of possible harm, a hint of more prostate cancer, not less. Let me be blunt, because this is exactly where blunt saves people. Do not go out and mega-dose selenium or vitamin E supplements, thinking you're protecting your prostate. The good evidence points the other way. If you want selenium, and a little is genuinely good for you, get it from food, where it comes in a sane, safe amount that your body knows how to handle. And here's the easy plate version. A Brazil nut or two has plenty of selenium, more than enough for a day. In fact, Brazil nuts are so rich in it that a couple is the dose, and a big handful every day would actually be too much. So 1 or 2 Brazil nuts, not a fistful, and definitely not a supplement bottle. That's the honest, safe way to handle selenium, and I wanted you to hear it from someone who isn't selling you the pill. I sat with a man last spring, 66 years old, whose PSA had been creeping up a little year after year, and he was drowning. Call him Harold. Harold wasn't sick, I want to be clear. His doctor was watching him, keeping an eye on the number, which is exactly the right thing. But Harold had done what so many men do. He'd gone down the internet rabbit hole, and his bathroom counter looked like a pharmacy. 20-some bottles, a couple $100 a month, saw palmetto and selenium and high-dose vitamin E, and 3 things he genuinely could not pronounce. And he sat across from me, almost embarrassed, and asked, "Is any of this even doing anything?" And I told Harold the truth, the same truth I'm telling you. Most of those bottles he could pour down the drain and lose nothing but money. And the high-dose vitamin E, I told him gently, the best trial we have suggests he might be better off without. But the boring, cheap stuff, a handful of pumpkin seeds on his yogurt, a tablespoon of ground flax in his oatmeal, a Brazil nut, more plants, more walking, better sleep, and above all, keep showing up for that PSA test and keep talking to his doctor. That's the stuff with the steadiest footing and the lowest cost. Harold let out this long breath, like he'd been holding it for a year. He'd been carrying this idea that taking care of himself had to be expensive and complicated and frightening. And it was such a relief to hear that the affordable, simple version is also the more defensible one. He told me a few weeks later he'd cleared the whole counter down to a jar of pepitas and a bag of ground flax in the freezer, and that he wasn't dreading his mornings anymore. That's the part I think about, not the chemistry, the morning. A man who used to choke down 20 bitter pills now eats a bowl of yogurt with seeds on it and feels like he's doing right by himself. That's a better life, and it happens to also be the better supported one. And let me be straight with you, because we've reached the place where I have to be. None of this is a cure. A seed does not kill prostate cancer in your body the way a headline says it does. When you see that word, starve or kill, attached to a food, that language comes from the petri dish, from compounds dripped onto cancer cells in a laboratory, at concentrations you could never reach by eating, and your living body breaks these compounds down in ways a dish never has to. A handful of pumpkin seeds is not going to undo a tumor, and a spoon of flax is not going to shrink one. And if you ever see a video or a bottle promising you that, close the tab and keep your wallet shut, because that person is selling something and it isn't the truth. Here's the honest version, the one I'd stake my name on. For pumpkin seeds, real human evidence for easing the symptoms of a swollen, non-cancerous prostate, and early lab work on the cancer side. For ground flaxseed, one small, short, before-surgery human study where the cell division marker dropped, plus a consistent population pattern, both encouraging, neither one proof. For selenium, a clear lesson to get it from a Brazil nut and stay away from the high-dose pills. That's it. That's the whole honest claim. These foods shift the odds a little, maybe, over years, and they cost you almost nothing to try. I won't dress it up bigger than that, because the day I start overselling you is the day you should stop trusting me. So here's your one thing this week, and it's genuinely one cheap thing. On your next shop, buy 1 bag of raw unsalted pumpkin seeds and 1 bag of ground flaxseed, flax meal, the already ground kind to keep it simple. Together, that's a few dollars and it'll last you weeks. Put the ground flax in the freezer when you get home. Then tomorrow morning, build 1 bowl, a scoop of yogurt or a bowl of oatmeal, a small handful of pumpkin seeds on top, and a tablespoon of ground flax stirred in. That's the whole assignment. 1 bowl, 1 morning, and then see if you like it, because the best habit in the world is worthless if it's miserable and you quit it by Thursday. If you like it, it's now just part of your life, and you stop having to think about it. And if you want a Brazil nut for your selenium, have one, just 1 or 2, not a handful. But start with that bowl. That's the step I'd start with myself, and the step I'd put in front of my own brother. Let me leave you with this, and I mean it calmly, not as a slogan. You hold 1 lever every single day, 3 times a day, and it's your plate. That is not nothing. You can control your genes, you can control everything that happens in that gland, and I would never stand here and tell you a seed puts you in charge of cancer, because it doesn't. But you can control what goes in the bowl tomorrow, and you can do the small, cheap, pleasant, defensible thing, consistently, for years. And here's the one I'll repeat until I'm hoarse, because it's the most important sentence for the men watching. None of this, not one seed, replaces getting checked. Keep getting your PSA looked at. Keep that conversation with your urologist going, because screening is a good, normal, sensible thing to keep doing, and food sits alongside it, never instead of it. Be the safe driver, do the doable thing. Bring it to the people caring for you, and let them do the rest. Your last decades can be good ones, and a bowl of yogurt with seeds on it is a fine place to start that work. Keep it simple, keep it on your plate, and I'll see you right back here. Bring a friend who needs this. And tell me in the comments which one you're starting with this week, the pumpkin seeds or the flax, and how old you are, because I read every single one of these.